Two parents, their child is killed, and no one's arrested. And I heard you at your press conference talking about how you prosecute cases. You are there the night of the shooting, okay? So let's do that. Let's say that you were there the night of the shooting. Does George Zimmerman get arrested?
Bernie?
We would have gone out and evaluated the evidence. We would have sat through the interview of George Zimmerman, and at that time we would have probably sat back and then analyzed what he said.
So based upon what he said in this case, if you guys are there, does George Zimmerman get arrested?
No, and neither does any other citizen who is in a arguable claim of justifiable use of deadly force until all of the evidence has been analyzed. The people who are saying, but they determined there was no probable cause. Well, the DNA hadn't even been done yet. So how do you test the truth of George Zimmerman's statements without analyzing all of the evidence? So in a lot of justifiable use of deadly force cases, the arrest doesn't happen immediately.
If we had been at the scene, we would have kept him going. And when I mean the scene, it's back at the police station. We would have gotten the analysis. Then what I would have requested is for him to come back in, have the detectives, and actually have him demonstrate how he took the gun out and see how close it was and how Trayvon, he claims, was on top. And then at that time, I think we would have broken him.
Part of the frustration of Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin in this case, because I spoke to them before there was ever an arrest, was that no one's been arrested. So do you think the timetable would have been different if you were handling this? Because that's why this story became so big.
Well, here's what people need to realize. What we do, in addition to going out to the scenes, we make contact with the victim's family right away. We get them in our office, and we explain what the process, what we're going through, and why it's beneficial to let it play out. In other words, that there may not necessarily be an arrest right away, but it's to our benefit.
Can you answer, and I don't know if you can, in just a couple words, how long do you think it would have taken you to arrest George Zimmerman if you had been handling the case from the first night?
I think it would depend on how long it took to analyze the evidence. The evidence was analyzed once we requested it, and it was done. It was done pretty quickly. So what I was hoping for, quite frankly, is for him to end up coming back. Even when we got involved, we were trying to get him to come back, and then our detectives would have interviewed him.
Is that days, weeks?
I think it would have taken at least 30 days.
Probably, maybe a little more, because we're very cautious. We encourage the standard we use up here. We know our police officers can make arrests based on probable cause. The reason we work with them is we want to work our case to a point where we think we can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's just how we do business up here. Not to say that they didn't do business well down there. No one could have made a determination on this case without having all of the evidence analyzed and challenging the defendant's statements.
Okay, now you started talking about this, and there was that videotape, George Zimmerman the next day with police doing this walkthrough. I looked at it and I said, this guy's never been challenged. He's not tied in. He's not locked into a story. Do you guys do anything differently if you've got George Zimmerman without an attorney telling you exactly what happened, where it happened?
It would have been a more aggressive interview by the detectives. I think that started on the 29th, a few days later. But really what you want to do is you want to confront him. You want to lock him into a statement, as you're saying, and then we want to really confront him. And I don't know that that was done until the very end, and it was only a start because they didn't have all the evidence. They didn't have the DNA. They didn't have all that stuff.
But let's talk about the police in this case. It's the detective, Serino, at trial, basically saying, I believe George Zimmerman.
We had filed motions. That's inadmissible in a courtroom, and the judge, as you might recall, after the fact, the next day asked the jury to disregard that because just like if a detective said, oh, I think he's guilty as hell, and all this evidence, they can't say that.
But that opinion was that this guy, I believe him, he's innocent. I don't see police officers doing that. I mean, is there something else going on here?
Well, what Detective Serino should have said is, I can't make that determination because once I finish my investigation, the physical evidence has to be analyzed, and that had not been done at the time his job was through. He had actually turned the case over to Norm Wolfinger's office and had requested a capias For what, Bernie? Second-degree murder?
Originally it was second degree,
Yes.
the first draft, and then it was the manslaughter.
So Serino thought it should be manslaughter or second degree.
Or second-degree murder. And so the prosecution was in the process, and they had impaneled a grand jury, and were going to get this evidence lined up, and I assumed they were going to get the DNA done and the other stuff that we did. So this case was incomplete at best at the time it was assigned to us, and at the time Serino had supposedly made up his mind.
Now, if he made up his mind that way, at trial, everybody who's watching him is taking it a much different way. And I'm sure the 6 women of Seminole County who set George Zimmerman free were reading differently. Why? Why?
You know, we're stuck with the evidence we have. We would have
You're being
loved to.
nice. Are you being nice right now?
Well, no, this is the truth. You know, we don't get to pick our witnesses. We've got to deal with what we've got, and we've got to do the best we can.
But usually you're in a safe place when you've got a police officer on the stand, right?
Usually we're on the same team, and I'll leave it at that.
And then, Vinny, that would have left us in the position of attacking Chris Serino, who just tried to do a good job on this case. We would have had to go, but Detective Serino, you made up your mind before the DNA was done. You made up your mind before you checked the medical records to show that his injury that looked so bloody in that first photograph was really a cut this big. It was a cut this big. So how could you say you believed his story? So that's why prosecutors take over the cases. That's why police officers don't prosecute their own cases, because we have to look at the additional evidence and what refutes George Zimmerman's story. And there was a wealth of hard, cold, physical evidence, DNA and everything else that showed that George Zimmerman lied in his statements to the police.